The 2025 season is still several months away, but it's becoming pretty clear there's not a whole lot of confidence in the Saints. In fact, they have the lowest odds out of any team in the NFL to win the Super Bowl. Is this lack of trust in the Saints warranted? We'll get into it and my overall thoughts on the schedule coming up right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Vicknair Injury Lawyers. If you need any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, hurt offshore, Scott Vicknair handles it all. You give them a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. As I mentioned in the tease, the Saints are, as of right now, projected to be the worst team in the NFL. I'll get into my thoughts on whether or not I think that's warranted and what could lead to the Saints having the worst Super Bowl odds out of any team. Before I do that, just want to say a quick word real quick. Thoughts and prayers with Jim Irsay's family. It came out that the Colts owner has passed away at the age of 65, which in my opinion, it's pretty young, and I know obviously Jim Irsay's had his troubles and whatnot, but I know there's a lot of Colts fans right now are hurting. So my thoughts are with his loved ones, and obviously not great for the NFL. Really sad news today. And, the timing of it is really tough. NFL just went through their votes with all the owners about the tush push, playoff seeding, all that. And just a really sad day for the NFL, obviously losing one of their 32 owners. So thoughts and prayers with Jim Irsay's family. That said, I mentioned at the start, the New Orleans Saints are entering a new era. I know Mickey Loomis is still around. Jeff Ireland's still around. Obviously, Yale Benson is still around. But Kellen Moore, obviously coming over as the new head coach, Tyler Shuck being drafted with the 40th overall pick in this year's draft. Whether fans want to say it's a full-flesh re-tear or rebuild, the Saints are entering a new era. And there's a little bit of an unknown, and unknown can be scary. I also think it can be exciting. And for the Saints right now, I actually tend to lean towards the latter. We've seen the Saints kind of caught in no man's land the last couple of years. I'd say the Dennis Allen era of the New Orleans Saints was the definition of being in that no man's land, right? Winning 7 games, winning 9 and 8, but you're in a bad division. You still don't make the playoffs. And then obviously flaming out in his third year. Dennis Allen's era was where you don't want to be in the NFL. You're not bad enough to get the number 1 pick. You're not good enough to contend for a Super Bowl. And while I obviously don't believe the Saints are going to be a contender this year, I do believe there's going to be bumps and bruises. The NFL, particularly Vegas, has the Saints projected to be the worst team in the NFL. How did we get there? Well, right now, they have the worst odds to win the NFC, plus 13,000. So if by some reason you think the Saints are going to make a run, value there is terrific. But obviously, they're not going to win the NFC South, plus 13,000. They have the lowest odds, obviously, to win the Super Bowl. They're not going to do that. And what makes it kind of frustrating / scary, I'd say, for the Saints is they're supposed to have the second easiest schedule in the NFL. So second easiest schedule in the NFL, but you are at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to Super Bowl odds. And there are reasons for it. I look at this Saints team. I don't know who their quarterback's going to be and if he's going to be any good. Like I am one of those people who tends towards the optimistic side of what Tyler Shuck can be. And I'm going to be rooting for him all the way. I mean, you draft this kid at 40. He's embracing the city. He's an unknown. There is potential there, and he's wearing the black and gold. I'll be supporting him every step of the way. That said, we don't know what he's going to be. The O-line, I think that has improved, but we don't know how it's going to look in terms of on the field. What's the unit going to be? Banks at guard? Is he going to play tackle? What do you do with Penning? A lot of questions there. D-line, I still think this is a weak unit. I think the Saints have made some improvements. Obviously, getting Vernon Broughton from Texas was nice. Bringing in Godshaw in that trade with the Patriots will give you some help in the 3-4 scheme. But the Saints don't have that difference maker at the D-line. I think that Brian Brzee can get better. I think that Chase Young can get better. When Chase Young got that contract, I talked about, hey, if you can get that second half of the year and double it, that's a damn good player. So there is potential there, but I'm not loving the D-line unit. I have concerns about cornerback. Obviously no more Lattimore, no more Debo. You're going to rely on Kool-Aid McKinstry. You're going to rely on Alontae Taylor. Can they step up? Can they play to their potential? If so, amazing. If not, that's a question mark. And then offensively, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, I like that tandem an awful lot. But what happens if someone goes down? Who is going to be that next guy to step up? I still have questions. So I understand why the Saints are projected to be the worst team in the NFL. But I don't have to agree with it. And frankly, I don't agree with it because I look around this league and I see a lot of bad NFL teams. A lot of bad NFL teams. The Giants are there. The Jets are there, which, by the way, the Saints play both of them. Keeping it in the NFC South alone, there's this idea that because the Panthers built late season momentum, they're out of the woods. They're fine now. And I don't know if that's true. There's still question marks about quarterback. There's still question marks about head coach. There's still question marks about the roster. So you play them twice a year. Looking around, the Buccaneers and the Falcons should be good teams, but they're not world beaters. So schedule-wise, the Saints' schedule isn't all that rough. And for that reason, that's why it's tough for me to believe they're going to be the worst team in the NFL. And another factor is I think they're going to get the hardest part of their schedule out of the way in the beginning. And that may stink because you may start 0-4, but Arizona, San Francisco, Seattle, Buffalo is a really, really brutal way to start the season. It might make some people be discouraged to watch the rest of it. But my argument would be this. The Saints season is all going to be predicated on two things. How does Kellen Moore look as the head coach of the Saints? And how does Tyler Shuck look in Kellen Moore's offensive system? And if we start to see progression week by week, natural progression, I think you're going to see the Saints start to play good football as the middle of the season goes along. But more importantly, there's going to be those building blocks that when the year ends, you're not feeling like you're in the gutter. And I think that's important for the Saints. And I also would say this about this team. There are concerns that I have, don't get me wrong, but I do believe deep down that this offensive line can be a top 10 unit this season. And if this offensive line is a top 10 unit, I just find it very hard to see a team dictating the trenches and then finishing last in the NFL. To me, that doesn't happen. If you win in the trenches, I believe you're able to win in the win-loss column. That doesn't mean necessarily the Saints are going to be a winning team. They're not going to, in my opinion, this year. I think this is going to be your rebuilding year. I think a lot of people are just assuming that they're going to be the worst team in the NFL, and I just don't see it that way. I really don't. And I look around this league. If Pittsburgh doesn't sign Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph's their starter. I mean, that's not looking pretty great in my opinion. I mentioned the two New York teams. Tennessee's got to figure out what they're going to be. Indianapolis is going through some struggles with Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. What's going to happen to their quarterback situation? There are a ton of teams in this NFL right now that you look around and you're going, man, I don't know if they're going to be any good. And again, for me, the Saints are the worst team in the NFL this year if they don't get good quarterback play. Because if they get decent quarterback play, and I'm just saying decent, I think Kellen Moore will be able, with his offensive system, with his O-line, to manufacture wins. And that's okay. Like, the Saints don't need to be 9-8 for me to feel good this year. They don't need to be 7-10 for me to feel good this year. If the Saints go 5-12, and again, that's not the season that fans want, but if they go 5-12, and I feel like, after an 0-4 start to the season, they finished 5-8 and they were ascending, that's all that matters to me, by the way. And again, everything will kind of tell as time goes on, but it's hard to say that team's going to be the worst team in the NFL when you're dealing with two unknowns at the most important parts of an NFL team, coach and quarterback. I look around the NFL and there are knowns at certain spots. And because of that, I could say, man, you're going to struggle. You are going to struggle. Like, if you just look around the NFL right now and you take a glance at the rest of the league, you go to let's say go to the AFC. You go to the AFC and I look at a team like the Browns. That, to me, that's a struggle. That's a struggle. We've seen it the last couple of years. We know what their coaching staff is. We know what their roster is right now. That seems like a team that's going to be on the struggle bus or keep it in the NFC. I've seen the Giants struggle the last 2 years mightily. I think they'll continue to be on the struggle bus. Same coach. And yeah, you brought in Russell Wilson, but Russell Wilson didn't exactly do anything with the Steelers last year outside of a couple of good games to start. And then it really just, the trains went off the track. So the Saints have unknowns because the idea that they're going to be bad is the assumption that Tyler Shuck ain't any good. And if Tyler Shuck is just a decent rookie quarterback, a solid rookie quarterback, I think they'll be able to manufacture a solid team in terms of being a consistent product and not the worst team in the NFL. Again, they're not going to be a winning team this year in my book. They're not going to contend for anything in this year, but it's not about that. It's about rebuilding for the Saints, and we'll see how they go from there. But, I just found it fascinating to look at the odds and then look at the schedule. They're telling you they think they're going to be the worst team, and maybe they end up being that. But I don't know. I've watched enough Saints football where I feel like that's probably not where it's going to go. And if that is what happens, then all right, you're picking number one. You go from there, you see where it goes. But I don't think that's going to be the case for the Saints. Willie Handy says, well-deserved thanks to Mickey in regards to them being the worst team in the NFL. I mean, look, part of that is that, right? I look at the Saints and you think, well, how did we get here? Well, poor drafting, poor free agency decisions. Obviously Derek Carr just retired, but that factors into it. You gave a 4-year, $150 million deal to a guy that did not do much for your team. That factors into it. Whiffing on picks like Peyton Turner, a first-round pick, whiffing on Isaiah Foskey, a second-round pick. All these things really matter. And you made the Trevor Penning trade, that whiffed. Not only did you, flame out with Trevor Penning, the pick you traded ended up being Jalen Carter. So those 3 picks that I mentioned, the Penning move, drafting Peyton Turner, drafting Isaiah Foskey, like that's where you're supposed to build your team, and you failed there. And now on top of it, you take that part out, right? You signed Derek Carr. That didn't work. So, Mickey obviously plays a hand in it. Your GM is, for the most part, he's the reason you're fielding a good roster or a poor roster. So that's definitely part of it, Derek says Saints have just enough vets to sneak too many wins for the number 1 pick. Should have tanked and got on the Nuss bus, though. Look, I'm not a big believer in tanking. I don't think it works. I don't think you can convince people to do it. I think the Jaguars are a really good example of it. I think the Jaguars are a team that had picked number 1 God knows how many times in my life, and they're an unknown. I don't know if they're going to be any good this year. I don't. So I'm a little torn on that. Yeah, I understand why fans would want them picking number 1, but my argument for this is guys they got to produce now. Like even Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore doesn't have to make the playoffs this year to be a good coach. But if Kellen Moore goes 2-15 this year, Saints fans are going to look at him funny. They're going to be like, all right, maybe you're not that good of a coach. That's the truth. That's how it would be. So I'm not a believer in tanking, nor do I want them to, and nor will they. Jack says, is Arch Manning not the chosen one to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force? Look, that's part of it, right? A lot of people want to see Arch play for the Saints. I don't think he's declaring this year. I'll keep saying it. I don't think he's declaring. I think he's going to play 2 more years at Texas, and then it'll go from there. Jerry says, Chris, we're not the worst team in the NFL. I agree, Jerry. Look, I'll put it this way, because everyone loves to say it. Let's take the Giants, for example. The Giants are going to start this season, right, against the Commanders, then the Cowboys, then the Chiefs, and the Chargers, and the Saints, then the Eagles, Broncos, Eagles, Niners, Bears, Packers, Lions, Patriots, Commanders, Vikings, Raiders, Cowboys. I have to fucking squint to see like 3 wins there. So this idea that the Saints are by far and away going to be the worst team in the NFL, you're operating under Shuck being a horrible quarterback, like the worst quarterback in the league. But what if he's decent? Again, what if he is rookie year Mac Jones? Not the best quarterback in the world, but good enough. You're not going to be the worst team in the NFL. So that's just where I'm at. Ryan says this is Jake Hayner's team. No, I don't think there's a hot take or anything. I think Jake Hayner's going to get cut before week 1. That's just my prediction. Pablo says, even if the Saints end up being the worst team in the league, this upcoming season, the only thing that matters is how hard the team is playing for Kellen and how hard they fight to stay in games. That is part of it, no doubt. And Pablo, you said the Detroit Lions of 2021 to 2022. I love that you mentioned that. Let's bring that up, because I think that is a brilliant point that you mentioned, Pablo. So I'll keep this up here. Dan Campbell goes to Detroit, and in their first year, they go 3-13-1. And although they were bad, anyone who watched the Lions saw that, man, they fought their ass off every fucking game. And towards the end of the year, they actually were winning some of those. Again, only won 3, but they were winning some. They were competing. The next year, didn't make the playoffs, but 9-8. And in the final game of the season, they play the Packers, who needed to win to get into the playoffs. Lions were playing for nothing. And the Lions look like the more desperate team in that setting because of Dan Campbell, what he has established as a culture. You get into year 3, they go 12-5. They make it to the NFC Championship game. And obviously this year, although they stumbled in the divisional round against the Commanders, they go 15-2. There's that upward projection, that trajectory of them. 3 wins, 9 wins, 12 wins, 15 wins. And I'm not saying the Saints are going to do that, because the Saints have question marks. Detroit, one thing about them, they had their quarterback in Jared Goff, and they built out the rest via the draft. Saints have to do that. Maybe this draft class is the first start to building that out. You get Fuaga, maybe you have your quarterback in Shuck. We'll see how that goes. But I think that's a very good example, right? Worst team, to me, it's not always about that. I think for New Orleans, again, if they win 5 games, but I feel like, man, the upward trajectory is there, and I believe that Kellen Moore is the right guy for the job, I'm going to walk away from this season feeling pretty good. Because win-loss isn't the whole story. Dennis Allen went 9-8 in his second year as the head coach. 9-8. And that season finished, and I came on this podcast a million times and said he has to get fired. And I still said it when the season started. He's got to get fired. Dennis Allen wasn't the guy, and you can tell. So, again, win-loss is important at a certain point. But when you're a 37-year-old coach, you're the youngest coach in the league, as you are in Kellen Moore, I can have some patience with you. I just need to see progress. I don't need to see a set number of wins. Captain Deluxe says the Saints are starting over. That is a good thing. Stay away from old free agents and build through the draft. It'll happen with 3 seasons. The only thing I would say about the free agents part, and I'm not disagreeing with you, is that I think that for 1-year deals, there's nothing wrong with that. If the Saints go out there tomorrow and sign Asante Samuel Jr. to a 1-year deal, would that really be a bad thing? To me, I don't see it that way. I think it'd be fine. You got to go out there and build out the rest of your roster. If the Saints want to go add a receiver, so be it. I would be okay with it. So, I think that as long as you're not hampering the future of your team, I think that's okay. But other than that, I would caution towards not signing vets for anything over a year. But a 1-year deal at this stage in free agency where they won't cost much, I'm okay with it. Michael says, I believe the Saints will win 4 to 5 games and embrace in the beginning of a rebuild. I just want to see young players develop this season. Yeah, I think that's okay. First off, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I think that's what it's all about, right? Obviously the main takeaway is Shuck has to be good. And if Shuck looks awful, then you're back to the drawing board. You're drafting a quarterback again, and you don't feel like much progress was made. So I understand that. But I look at this team. How does Olave look in a full season? Does he look like a great player? Because I think he can be one if he's healthy. That would be a win for me. How does the O-line look? Fuaga, Banks. Can McCoy stay healthy? McCoy stays healthy and Fuaga and Banks are the real deal. This O-line is going to be very good. I can't stress that enough. I look around the NFL and I don't see a lot of talented offensive lines. From just a potential standpoint, I believe the Saints have that. Now, D-line, I have massive question marks. Can Chase Young finally be that guy that he showed in his rookie season and he showed at the end of last year? Okay. Advantage Saints if that's the case. Cornerback, Kool-Aid McKinstry. You talk about players developing. Kool-Aid McKinstry, 2nd year now. What does he do? Alontae Taylor, year 4. Who are you? Are you a really good slot corner, or can you be that outside guy? So there's no question development matters, and those are the wins. I was hoping that would be the case last year. That's what I wanted last year. But we didn't get much development. Guys like Penning, we saw a little bit of development, then it flatlined. Foskey did not develop at all. Kendra Miller did not develop at all because he's barely on the field. So when you don't get that, it is frustrating for sure. Derek says, don't forget not going to get Mahomes to sit behind Breeze. We knew it was the end, and Mickey just said, nah. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. I totally get that. My thing would be this about the Saints. Had they won one of those years from 2017 to 2020 when they had their chances, yeah, obviously you're still bringing it up because it's Patrick Mahomes, right? And he is going to finish his career at minimum as the 2nd best quarterback of all time. So we will bring it up. It'll be the one that got away and the biggest mistake the Saints made. But I think the real reason it stings is because they didn't win a Super Bowl in that stretch. Had the Saints won in 2018, guys, Patrick Mahomes, obviously a phenomenal player. I'd love to see him play for the black and gold, but I would have a different feeling about the Saints. I think we all would. I think the Saints would have embraced their rebuild a little bit easier, right? They wouldn't have been chasing something that got away. And if Breeze brought 2 Super Bowls to New Orleans, we'd be on cloud 9. I think a lot of us were on cloud 9 for a while because of 1 Super Bowl. So, that's the way I look at it. I think mistakes happen in this league. Technically the Bills passed on Mahomes. Now they got Josh Allen, but it's just kind of how the league goes. And I think the frustration for me would more so be the Lamar thing, even though the Saints were never going to take him, than it would be Mahomes. Because the Saints did get Lattimore. They still had Breeze, who was playing in I would say in his prime still. It was an MVP candidate for the season after, but it definitely will be the draft story that we're never going to be able to get rid of, no matter how much we want to. Jerry says Jake Haener will be cut later. I agree with that. I agree. Captain Deluxe mentioned this in the chat, and kind of in agreement on this one. I kind of think that the Saints 2023 class is on high alert to be cut this offseason. Let's just go through it real quick. Brian Brzee is obviously a good player. So I'm not going to mention him potentially getting cut because that's not going to happen. And he's a good player, and I hope he can continue to develop. If you get better at run stuffing, we're talking about a really good player. So A.T. Perry's already off the squad, right? Saldiveri never really plays. He's always hurt. Foskey is just a zero. He's a zero for this team. So they can cut him, and I'd be okay with that. Kendra Miller, he's never healthy. I think he's talented. Kendra Miller might go out there this year in Kellen Moore's system where they're going to run the football really well. And he might have a couple of good games where I'm like, all right, I'm back on the Kendra Miller hype train. And then it could come crashing down the next week if he, pulls his calf muscle or something. So there's question marks about him. Jake Hayner, I think he'll be gone. Jordan Howden, I don't think he's developed, although he's a 5th-round pick, so it's okay. You're not exactly putting a lot into that. So outside of Brzee, who's been the guy? Foskey, no. Kendra Miller, never healthy. Saldiveri, never healthy. Jake Hayner's not the guy. Jordan Howden, an okay role player. So to me, I look at the 2023 class, and we talk about Saints being the worst team in the NFL, or at least that's what ESPN's projecting, and that's what, I saw DraftKings odds. They had him with the worst odds to win the Super Bowl. Draft class like 2023, that's why you end up in this spot, When you whiff on that many picks, it is tough to build towards the future. Joshua says the NFL is set up now where it doesn't take a lot to get good sometimes. It's about injury luck. I don't disagree with that, Joshua. I think, we've seen now, you hit on one draft, I don't say you're in the driver's seat, but you're back. I look at the Washington Commanders. They look like a wasteland for the last couple of years. Look at the Washington Commanders' history. The past couple of seasons, getting Jaden Daniels, that was a team that was floating in just misery. 3-13 in 2019, 7-9 in 2020, wins the division because of it, but then they get bounced opening round. 7-10 in 2021, 8-1 in 2022. So you literally couldn't be more mediocre than that. 2023, 4-13. And then you draft Jaden Daniels, you win 12 games, and you make it to the NFC Championship game. So things turn on a dime. We've seen this in the league before. CJ Stroud with the Texans just did it 2 years prior. So there's been that trend. And that's another reason why when we hear worst team in the NFL, I'm not ready to go into that yet, because we have now seen for the last 2 years a rookie quarterback with a coach who's in his first year at that team make it to the playoffs. And that doesn't mean the Saints are going to do that, right? Like, as I said, I don't think the Saints are a playoff team. But I just watched Dan Quinn in his first year with the Commanders and Jaden Daniels' rookie season go to the playoffs. And the year before that, I watched CJ Stroud in his rookie year with DeMeco Ryans as the rookie year head coach, and they made the playoffs. And again, I don't think the Saints are going to be a playoff team. But there is the trend of that first-year pairing having some success. And success to me is not making the playoffs, but if they look pretty good and they go 7-10, when everyone had them being the worst team in the NFL, I would say that's actually not a bad year for this team. So that's where I'm at. Xavier says, thoughts on the Mari Cooper report. So I haven't seen anything really yet for Amari Cooper. Is there something I missed? And if so, let me know. Like, I saw them linked to him a couple of weeks ago as like a possibility, but I don't think there's anything of substance there unless I missed it. But as far as that, look, he'd be a guy that you bring in at this age that you're just hoping he could be a filler player. I don't know if he is. I was kind of discouraged by what I saw in Buffalo. I thought Amari Cooper was really just a non-factor for this team. He does have history with Kellen Moore's system, and I think that maybe could be intriguing for this team, though. So it's possible. It's possible that he's a guy that they have on their radar. Jack says the trade-up for Davenport instead of waiting for Lamar was way worse than missing on Mahomes by one slot. The concession workers at the Dome have made more of an impact on the Saints than Foskey. You're definitely not wrong about that. I mean, concession workers do great work. Foskey has not done anything for the Saints. Pablo says, I still wonder if the Davenport pick was due to Sean, Mickey, or a mix of both, especially passing up on Lamar or even any other play in the first round that would have helped that run. Yeah, I think the Saints, they looked at their team and they thought, we're a pass rusher away from reaching the mountaintop. And, honestly, they might not have been wrong. The problem is Davenport just never played. That is the problem. Like, even in his rookie season, Davenport, unfortunately, was starting to make an impact, and then he gets hurt. You didn't even get to see him at his full potential in his rookie season. And even 2021 is another example, right? He had 9 sacks in 11 games. Like, I do think Davenport could have been a good player in the NFL if he was healthy, but he wasn't. And I guess I can understand the rationale behind them thinking, okay, we have to really get better at defensive line. But what bothers me is they whiffed on that. And then like 2 years later, they go out and they made the same move with Trevor Penning. They traded a future pick because they're like, hey, we got to get better at tackle. And then they took a chance on Trevor Penning. And honestly, I think, truthfully, that it's pretty much the same situation. The only difference is the Saints were contending at the time. They weren't with Trevor Penning, but that actually makes the Trevor Penning situation worse. At least when the Saints went for it with Davenport and the move completely blew up in their face, and obviously I don't agree with what they did, they're going for it. And I commend them for that. They weren't going for anything other than a mediocre season with Trevor Penning, and that was a costly move. Forgive says, I feel unless the quarterbacks are a disaster, this roster floor is 7 wins. If you look at each position group other than quarterback, you can't say this roster dead last. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, right? Like, if you got to play this season under the assumption that people are healthy. So if Alvin's healthy, that's a really good running back. If Olave's healthy, that's a really good receiver. Shaheed's a good playmaker. I think you need a little bit more at wide receiver, though. I don't think the Saints have enough. Offensive line's got a ton of talent. A ton of talent. Fuaga, Banks, McCoy, Ruiz. We'll see where the hell they put Penning if they play him. Dylan Radins, who they signed. So you got 6 offensive linemen at your disposal. Defensive line, I don't know what to expect from them, but Chase Young and Brian Brzee, can one of them really come through? So we'll see what happens there. Safety, I keep saying this, and maybe I'll be wrong. I think what the Saints did at safety this offseason, it puts a smile on my face, man. I love good safety play. And when you go out there and you sign Justin Reed, and then you double dip and get Jonas Sanker in the draft, I'm all in on this safety room. I'm all in. So I'm very excited about that aspect of this team. Alontae Taylor's a good football player. You just got to find the right fit for him. Demario Davis is aging, declining, but that's still a decent football player. Pete Werner's a decent football player. So I get what you mean, man. Like, I look around this roster. It's not a god-awful roster, but you're operating under the assumption that Tyler Shuck's going to be awful. For me personally, I think the smart thing to do is let's see how this guy plays for a month before we jump to any conclusions, as where this team can be. That's why I agree with you. Like, it's a bold risk to take saying they're going to be the worst team in the NFL. And we'll see. If that win-loss comes down, I might hammer it. I might take a chance on this team. Again, it's not me thinking they're going to be a good team, but, you look at the roster, there's a nice mix of vets on here that can still produce. Captain Deluxe says, thanks for this chat, brother. Always look forward to it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I love what you guys are here and able to put in comments. You guys are incredible as always. So, but the real thanks is to you guys. I can sit here at like 15 minutes after ranting about, them being projected to be the worst team in the NFL and then call it a night. And for you guys to be able to throw your comments in, I really appreciate it. Xavier says, just think Amari Cooper can fill that physical receiver role, but it's only that initial report, so it might not be serious. I mean, I don't think your thought's wrong, Xavier. It's kind of the same reason I mentioned Keenan Allen a couple of weeks ago. Saints got to mix it up here, right? You got speed, and a little bit more speed at receiver. You got to get some physicality in there, and they don't have that right now. Jaden says, hey, do you think that Kellen Moore can get the best out of wide receiver? Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Juwan Johnson, and Alvin Kamara in what I think is an awesome offensive scheme. Do you believe that he get the best out of all those players? I think he could definitely get the best out of Olave. I mean, Kellen Moore just sings Olave's praise every time he's asked about him. I'm excited about Olave if he can stay healthy. I'm excited about Rashid Shaheed. I think he's a good playmaker. He's just got to stay healthy as well. I am very interested. I have all the faith in the world in Alvin. As long as he's healthy, he'll produce. The player that I'm most interested in seeing is Juwan Johnson, because Juwan is the type of guy that will have a rough season. You're ready to quit him. And in the last 4 months of the year, he has a good finish. And he does that time and time again. And it makes you say, all right, I'll wait one more time. But the Saints go out there in free agency, and I thought they were going to make a splash at tight end. They do, but it's bringing back Juwan. And Juwan said what really sold him was Kellen Moore's scheme and the vision they had for him. So do I think Juwan could be a top-tier tight end? I don't. I'm not getting tricked anymore. But do I think the Saints re-sign Juwan Johnson because Kellen Moore's got some type of vision for him? Hell yeah. And to me, that is the difference, right? Like, I'm under the assumption that the Saints don't have that third pass catcher right now. It's Olave, Shaheed, and I don't know who it's going to be because I don't want to trust Cooks because he's old. I love Alvin, but you're obviously going to rely on him more in the running game than you are at receiving. Can Juwan be that third guy? And if Juwan is, that'd be great for this team. Flight Mazart says, Theo's Pizza. Yes, sir. Got the hat going on right here. So appreciate Appreciate the shout out. I like the colors too, by the way. It's just I'm a big fan of the blue meshing with the red. Flight Mazark says I like us being underrated. I mean, and definitely get used to it. I think they're favored in one game this season. One game, the Saints are favored in this year. So if you think the Saints are going to win more games than expected, this might legit be the year for you to kind of say, hey, I'll bet some spreads. I'll bet some spreads in the Saints' favor. Early thoughts here, but who do you like winning the NFC South next year? Oh man, this is why another reason why I can't buy that the Saints are going to be the worst team in the NFL. So initially, I thought Atlanta, because I thought Atlanta was kind of ascending towards the end of the year in terms of their young talent. I thought Drake London looked great at the end of the year. Penix got to start a couple games. Bijan obviously was doing Bijan type things. But I don't trust Raheem Morris as the head coach. And look, the Saints, they may have lucked out, but the Derek Carr situation's done. It's over with. The Falcons still have Kirk Cousins for $45 million on their payroll. And Kirk's not going to be a distraction. He's not Derek Carr. He's not Rodgers where he's going to kind of, make some headlines in that regard. But it is a story. If Penix goes out there, starts the season, and it's not great, and you still have a $45 million backup, a Pro Bowl backup, I don't know. I think things get a little rough. And I look at Tampa, who will be the favorites probably for most people. Are you going to strike gold for a third straight year at OC? I am very skeptical about that. Dave Canales was a home run for them, and then he goes to the Panthers. And then Liam Cohen was, I think, an even bigger home run for them, and then he goes to the Jaguars. Are you going to strike gold for a third straight year? You can. I'm not saying you can't. But, man, I look at this team. I don't know. You're promoting from within. I just have some doubts about Tampa. So I would say right now, I'll give them the slight edge. I will give Tampa the very, very slight edge because I think they had good offensive talent. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, McMillan's getting better. Obviously, Buck Irving's pretty good. But, oh, man, I am hesitant. Carolina, I have no confidence in them. And then the Saints, obviously, I don't have confidence in them winning division. But I just don't think this is a good NFC South. So I might go Bucks. But I'm not thinking very highly of the Buccaneers. I'm thinking 9 wins gets the job done. Forgive says, I think a successful season would be 6 wins unless Shuck plays out of his mind. 10 isn't totally unrealistic. If Shuck is year one Bryce Young, I think 5 to 6 would be the most realistic. Yeah, look, a lot of it's going to come down to Shuck for sure. There's no doubt. I agree with you. And that's why, it's going to fluctuate. If Shuck's bad, maybe this is a 3-win team. If Shuck's good, they're winning more than 5 games. So Neil says wide receiver and cornerback are our position needs at this point. Yeah, I'd say so. I said the biggest ones. Definitely corner. I think the Saints have made it pretty clear they want another corner. They made an offer to Charvarius Ward in free agency. They got outbid by the Colts. They've met with Asante Samuel Jr. And then wide receiver, Mickey said that Saints wanted to draft one, and their targets were getting taken right before they're on the board. So, I look at those spots. I'd probably say those are the ones that I'm most concerned about. It doesn't mean that, you fill those and I'm feeling better. But if the Saints do get Asante Samuel Jr. and the medicals check out, I'll have a little bit more trust in that depth at corner for sure. Forgive says, I've been seeing Bub memes a lot in their offseason videos and looked like he's been working hard. I really believe he'll be the big pass catcher. I think he's over 6'2", 200 pounds. Bub memes, I actually just did a podcast with Matt Miguez, and we were talking about Bub memes before because I was saying someone's got to emerge. And maybe it is Bub memes. And I don't know if Bub memes, what his ceiling is, but I know that Bub memes for a brief stretch had some potential shown there. And he is a little bit different from what the Saints have. He's not that speed type guy. He's more of a physical player, and maybe he emerges. And I'll be rooting hard for him, man. First off, I love his freaking name. I think it's one of the coolest names in the NFL. Hakeem says, I'm just trusting the process. I want to see growth from the young players and the young core players. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Hakeem adds, I'm glad we're in a rebuild, got a young head coach as a vision and what he wants his team to look like in 2 to 3 years. Yeah, it's one of those situations where I'm going to keep saying it, and people will say, oh, you're coping, whatever. The win-loss record, to me, is not going to determine whether or not the Saints have a great season. It's not. If they go 6-11, and I'm like, well, shit, I think Tyler Shuck might be their guy, I am feeling great. And if you finish the season and Olave had, 1,200 yards and Chase Young looked better and Kool-Aid McKinstry is an outside corner that you feel really good about, and Kelvin Banks is the truth, and Fuaga continues to improve, who gives a shit if they go 6-11 or 7-10 or whatever? Like, I feel like I might have a core there now. And then you go into year 2, and now you try to build on top of that. So I agree with you, Akeem. Akeem says, I like the potential of the O-line, and I like the depth on both the D-line and O-line, and that's where things start to improve. First, the line of scrimmage. Yeah, I think O-line I'm very, very confident in terms of their potential. D-line, I do like the depth. I do agree with that. But I am not totally confident in what they'll do, though, just because there's so many question marks, right? Like, Brian Brzee, really good pass rusher. He's got to get better at a run defender. What does Cam Jordan have in the tank? Godchaux, really good run defender. I'm happy about him, but how much of an impact player is he going to be? Vernon Broughton from Texas, like the pick. We'll see what he does. Carl Granderson, what is he going to bring to the table? I'm curious. I thought Carl kind of slowed down as the year went on. So, they got talent. I'm definitely more confident in the O-line, though. And to be honest, that's where it starts. If the O-line is moving people, Saints are going to stay in games. Walter says, I'll still never forget DA rambling about availability and not being able to evaluate players who aren't on the field. And then Mason Tipton still made the roster after missing the whole offseason. You're not wrong. I mean, amongst God knows how many things Dennis Allen said that was just absolute BS, And honestly, maybe it was a draft decision reason, but like Kendre Miller's another one too. Like, Kendre Miller was never on the field and he still made the roster. So it's funny that how it works. I would say as the years go on, though, you probably lose patience, right? Like, if some of these 2023 dudes cannot produce in the preseason, I think it's time for the Saints to cut bait. Like if Jake Haener doesn't get better, cut bait. If Sal DeVary's not healthy, maybe a cut bait, but all right, fine, decent depth. Howden's probably not seeing the field anyway because you got Justin Reed, you got Tyrann Mathieu, you drafted Jonas Sanker. So, that 2023 class, you don't have to be as patient with anymore. Hakeem says, I agree, Chris. Not worried about the record this year. I just want to see development and growth. I agree. Xavier says, looking forward to the preseason games to get a real look at both quarterbacks. Are the Saints, this is not necessarily a good thing, guys, but are the Saints in that small class of teams where, like, you're going to be excited to watch their preseason games? Because I am. I am very excited to see how this team is going to look in terms of what are these quarterbacks going to look like in preseason. They're going to look any good? They're going to look like shit. Which one looks better? Because we're going to hear a lot of training camp reports, but all that to me doesn't matter until you get on the field. Because in training camp, you heard about, hey, Haener and Rattler's really close. And then the games happen, and Rattler is 10 times better than Haener. So I'm excited for the preseason for sure. Rob says, I'm a realistic, lifelong fan since the 80s. This season, I'll settle for them simply not being both boring and bad. Pick and struggle for fuck's sake. Rob, I could not agree with you more. I think that was probably the final tag to the tagline for the Dennis Allen Saints. Boring and bad. And there's a lot of teams who are bad, but they're not boring. And there's some teams who are boring and good. I look around the NFL, and I'm going to be quite honest. Maybe this is considered a hot take, but I watched a lot of Chiefs games last year. They were good, but I kind of thought they were boring at times. And then on the flip side, you go around, you look at a team and I'm not saying that this means they're a good team. Okay, I'm not at all saying that, but there were moments last year where you watched the Bengals, and man, they were electric, but they didn't make the playoffs. So it is, you're not wrong about that. You're not wrong about that at all. Forgive says this division is literally a star quarterback away from winning it for years and years, and the Saints are the only team who most likely will be going through quarterbacks unless injuries happen. Please just find the guy. Another reason why, when I look at the NFC South, it's hard to gauge where the Saints are going to be in this picture. I don't think that the Panthers necessarily have a franchise guy in Bryce Young. I thought Bryce looked better as the year went along, but we'll see. Does he build off that? I think Michael Penix is a solid quarterback, but I don't think Michael Penix is going to be a superstar. And if I'm wrong. All power to him. Baker is who he is. He's a good quarterback. I don't think you could win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield, but he's a good quarterback. So, the Saints are in that spot where I don't know what they have at quarterback, and it might be shit. But maybe that leads you to the next guy, or maybe you found your guy. So we shall see. But I do agree with that point, though. I do agree with that point. Xavier says, looking to see what the quarterback and the wide receivers look more comfortable. See what quarterbacks the wide receivers look more comfortable playing with. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You're probably going to split reps. So it might be down the middle. I think Rattler should have a little bit of an early edge. He's been there for a year. He's a little bit more experienced. Forgive says, did you see the tush push ban list the Saints and Lions were the only NFC teams who voted it doesn't get banned? Yeah, Lions I thought was fascinating. Saints, I'm not surprised. I mean, Kellen Moore came from Philly. He's doing them a solid. Not surprised at all. Interesting, though. I'm at the point where even though I hate the play, I'm okay with it not getting banned. I think, like, the Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl because they pushed their way to a championship. They just dominated teams in the line of trenches, in the line of scrimmage, in my opinion. Like, when you dominate teams in the trenches, you're going to win most games. And Philly's playoff run beat the shit out of the Packers, beat the crap out of the Rams, beat the crap out of the Commanders, and then laid a smackdown on the Chiefs. So, like, yeah, is the tush push annoying to watch? Yeah, it doesn't look like football. But the Eagles aren't winning games because of the tush push. Walter says, I'm looking forward to seeing what our starting O-line looks like. I'm excited to see what we do with Penning. I think with another year of development, he's an average tackle, but an above-average guard. It's funny because all us Saints fans keep mentioning, hey, do you put Trevor Penning at guard? We keep mentioning it, and there's like no sign that's definitely going to happen. So I'm still kind of on the fence as to whether or not that they're going to make that switch. But I do agree with you. If you put Penning at left guard, hypothetically, and it's like Banks, Penning, McCoy, Ruiz, Fuaga, I'm interested. I am very interested in what that may look like for the Saints. But I do believe there's a lot of offensive line talent, and I think a lot of this team will come down to whether or not Fuaga and Banks are the guys. Walter says, also, Derek Brown and Trevor Penning can't stand each other, the same with him and Jeffrey Simmons. So if he does play guard, I'm going to be watching those matchups. Fair enough. I think if Trevor Penning plays guard, you're probably going to see a couple more fights because he's going to be right in the thick of things. I want to see it. And look, for the Saints, it's worth giving it a shot. Maybe they've seen things behind closed doors. They're like, yeah, this guy can't play guard. But I remember Mekhi Becton got drafted by the Jets, and they're like, well, he can't play guard. He's a tackle. He's too tall. And played him at guard with the Eagles last year, and he thrived in Kellen Moore's offense, and he earned himself a nice payday from the Chargers. So we shall see what happens. But, even that Penning situation, it all falls in under the grand scheme of things and what I've been trying to just hammer across the home as we get to our closing argument here on today's show. Maybe the Saints do end up being the worst team in the NFL. I'm not going to say that they're definitely not, but there are actual productive vets on this team paired with some unknowns. And I find it hard to believe that all the unknowns are going to blow up in the Saints' face. Like, I think they have a lot of talent at O-line. If that develops, you're going to be good in the trenches. You have a talented quarterback. Whether or not he plays well, I don't know. But Chuck does have talent. Let's not kid ourselves. Defensively, not loving it, but I do like the safety room. Maybe that'll be the strength of this team. And a Brandon Staley defense that definitely values having versatile DB. So Saints right now are favorites only win one of their games for this season. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because it's not about the wins and losses to me. It's about developing. And if the Saints develop, they're not going to finish as the worst team in the league. I can promise you that. So we'll see what happens, but that's going to wrap it up for this show, guys. I want to thank you guys, as always, for leaving your thoughts and comments. You guys are the best. I truly appreciate it. There's playoff basketball, playoff hockey going on. You guys decided to spend some time with me. I do greatly appreciate it, as always. So make sure you guys subscribe to Boot Crew Media's YouTube page. Got a lot of Pelicans content going there. So we'll see what happens. But I'll have you guys covered, as always, on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.